The aim of this work is to define the birth and the following evolution of the detective story, also called detective novel or crime novel, specifically referenced to the classic detective story. Edgar Allan Poe can be considered the biggest representative and creator of this genre, moving to Agatha Christie, biggest British representative, till the Italian detective story with two prominent writers as Leonardo Sciascia and Andrea Camilleri. Through different styles and linguistic varieties, the writers, the first American, the second English, and the last two Italians, can be considered complementary. The first one with composition that tend to a more Gothic style, but that still use a simple exposition of the narrative. The second that definitely use a more refined and elegant composition. Instead, the last ones often compare usual of dialectical linguistic Sicilian, more contemporary, that will bring into light some scam, political and economic of our country and in particular the south of Italy. For a long time, this genre was considered a lower genre for its style and contents. Few critics who have thought in its prosperous development. For more than 30 years, critics and writers have argued about the importance of the detective story in the Italian literature, making a distinction between high literature and literature for the mass. But this genre was already successful in both America and England since the second half of the 19th century. In Italy, this novel is called romanzo giallo, that means yellow novel. This expression derives from the cover's color used for Mondadori collection born in 1929. This term has been after changed into romanzo poliziesco, that means detective novel. In French, it's called roman policier. The detective story is defined by its structures rather than its matter. This genre in literature is in fact based on the construct between the appearance of things usually presented at the beginning of the book and the truth which is revealed toward the end of the story. Between these two extremes, appearing and being, the investigator undertakes an intellectual journey where he is able to decode the mystery through what is called the logic method, a methodology requiring rational thinking from the reader and which is in line with one of the detective story's main theme, logic reasoning. There are specific narrative procedures that are available to the novelist in order to create a particular effect, such as a sense of tension or the emphasis of a detail in the story. The detective story has not existed for a very long time. After years of discussion, scholars have unanimously established the date of the birth of this literary genre, 1841, the year in which the American poet Edgar Allan Poe published the novel The Murders in the Rue Morgue on the Graham's Magazine of Philadelphia. It can be said that it is the first time that in a crime novel the analysis of fact is given more importance than the description of feelings. Another important author who has given her contribution to the development of this genre is Agatha Christie, an undisputed pillar of the genre in all its development branch, ranging from short stories, novel, and play. Several subgenres and elements coexist in Christie, including country-set romance of Manna, the Mims Marple Circle, psychological and atmospheric elements, for example in Endless Night, a taste for scientific experimentation as in Murder in the Orient Express, spy fiction as the Burnford Cycle, political fiction as Passenger to Frankfurt, and metaphysical crime fiction as The Mysterious Mr. Queen. Anglo-Saxon literary world has always found inexplicable the great success of Poe's production in the continent, especially in France. Poe's works have nevertheless been seminal for European literature, particularly French literature, a massive and immediate influence destined to soon flourish in the narrative and in its novel, slower and more hidden, but durable, on poetry thanks to Baudelaire and Mallarmé approval. Poe has aesthetical and scriptural practice find life in literature. We can observe that in this translation of Mallarmé and in this French literature practice. Already in some of Mallarmé's old notebook manuscripts on 1860, when he was only 18 years old, we can find, together with his first attempt, numerous copies of literary translation of selected poems by Poe. This is the moment when Mallarmé's main interests distance themselves from Victor Hugo and direct themselves to Baudelaire and to poetic forms and previous technical that will be then influence his first poem. From this itinerary, it appears that Mahler's male loyalty has never broken, from the beginning, where he imitated Paul's metrics technique, to the maturity with which he founded his poetic principle. The principle is a legendary model of the foreign poet in a hostile world, as well as a concrete example of aesthetical lucidity. Poems offer a useful starting point to learn Mahler's male poetic. Cornerstone of its production, rare in verse and prose, they are unique, specific. In the history of translation, a clear example of the way of literary practice consider minor respect to creative writings. There have been numerous considerations on the status of translation and on its value. Mahler may offer the perfect example of a perfect literary translation. His tragedy represents this last stage of supreme literature, the function literary translation, humble and artisanal, in the free translation that appropriates the spirit of the original to the word by translation, the ambition, rejection of his own cultural linguistic identity, and the identification with the original. In Italy, unlike France and most Anglo-Saxon countries, the crime genre doesn't have a strong and long tradition. It only starts to spread in 1929 with the start of the book series I Libri Gialli by published giant Mondadori. Within the story of crime novel, it is possible to identify three historical periods: the origin years, the 60s and the 70s, and the modern years. The first few crime novelists soon recognized their scarce ability to handle the traditional patterns and model of detective novels, and are also aware of being still in a phase of development and training. In this condition, afraid to be rejected by the reader, they look for a compelling and engaging element to include in their novel that they take from different genres, from the feuilleton to adventure novel, from comedy to drama. To cite a few characteristic elements common to Italian crime novel, it is essential to observe their setting, as opposite to the urban setting of their fellow foreign authors. Italians were using idyllic and bucolic exposition. Furthermore, the character of the detective is often represented by an absolutely grotesque personality, always shifting between amateurishness and excessive narcissistic ambition. But most of all, the last element concerns the tendency to eliminate from the fiction twist every element of gory and bloody nature, transforming crime novels into stories with no crime, no corpse, no murder, and no death. Leonardo Sciascia and Andrea Camilleri will be the first successful Italian authors to stay to the classic detective novel structure, both Sicilian who have obtained a huge success in Italy and all over the world.